Okay, so hello everyone. Um, Thank you for coming. And there is, if you haven't seen it already, I think everyone has gotten food, but if you haven't seen it, there's food and flyers in the back. Um, so to begin, the graduate school is planning a bunch of new things this year in an effort to support our students. So it means a lot that you guys are here. Just some upcoming events. We have next week's Professionalism 101. That is the last of the semester, I want to say. It's learning how to remain present at the end of semester. So basically, kind of like a de-stress workshop from all the things that everyone has been working on from this semester. That will be November 22nd here at the same time. We also have a bunch of flyers of upcoming events in the back, such as the Red Hawk Talks and 3MT. So please grab some of those before you leave out. Also, if you haven't signed in already, you can see Haley over there. She's raising her hand and she'll sign you guys in. So we wouldn't be able to do all of our programming this year without collaboration of different academic and student offices around campus. So we're grateful for your help. Today we have Shelby Summers Ballard with us. She is the Associate Director for Academic Initiatives and Projects and also serves as a career advisor for graduate students at the Center for Career Exploration and Success, which is formerly known as just the Career Center. She earned her doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Hartford. Some of Shelby's focuses in the Career Center include job and internship search strategies. I've been to her, it really works. Interviewing techniques, networking resources, and development and coordination of programs that help promote career enhancement. That's a handful, but thank you for coming,
Yeah.
Shelby, and sharing your expertise.
Alrighty, thank you everyone. So thank you for joining me on this Friday afternoon. At least we have some sun. And for those of you watching online, I'm also so glad that you're able to be present for this topic. So again, I'm always really happy to talk about this because I think there's some confusion or some questions around the topics of resumes and CVs and what is a resume, what is a CV, when do I use which one, and so kind of just talking about that. What does the format look like? What are the headings? What are the expectations? What are the page lengths? So these are kind of all frequently asked questions that I get from graduate students when I'm meeting with them. Some students get confused when they're applying for jobs and it says upload your CV. And students are like, I don't have a CV, I just have a resume. So is it an interchangeable word? So these are just kind of some things that I want to talk about with you all today. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so feel free if you have questions to ask. We can kind of really make this a workshop setting. If you have your laptop and you want to go ahead and pull yours up, absolutely feel free to go ahead. We can kind of work as we go. But I just want to make sure that you leave with takeaways that you're able to either reorganize your resume or CV, or maybe you decide you want to also create a resume or create a CV. It's not unusual to have a mix of the two, depending on what type of work you're looking to go into. So these are kind of all things that we can talk about today. So I'm hoping that my PowerPoint is going to give you some things to think about, and then I'm going to show you some examples that I have that we can kind of talk through and work through as well. And then certainly some resources to help you craft yours. All right, so just what I want to come across within my PowerPoint are just the purpose, when do we use which one, what is the role of the employer? I have a lot of students asking me, like, what is the employer looking at or looking for when I submit my documents? Talking about format, I want to go through maybe some different types of formats, and then I have some examples of different formats as well, so you can decide what works for you. A lot of that is also based on personal preference. What are the components? I'm sure if all of us were to combine our documents together, there probably would be very different versions of them. So what is yours supposed to look like? A lot of that is based on your own personal experiences. And then how do you write a compelling bullet point or a compelling narrative? So regardless of what type of document you have, whether it's a resume or a CV, there does need to be an articulate description of what it is that you've done. So we're going to talk through that as well. So I first want to just ask, what is the purpose of a resume or CV? Just kind of ask you all, just kind of shout it out. What is the purpose of it? Is that a little hand raise? Okay. Yes, that's exactly it. So to highlight your strengths and to really almost just showcase a snapshot to the employer, whether that's industry, whether that's academia, it doesn't matter. It's conveying the same type of thing, is a snapshot showcasing all of the amazing experiences and things that you've done. So it's almost like your opportunity to really brag on yourself, to really tell your story. So we kind of already hit some of these things, but typically when it comes to thinking about the documents, your CV and your resume, traditionally resumes should be bullet points, just 3 to 4 concise bullet points. But on CVs, you can have bullet points if that's the type of format you like, or you can have narratives. So it really depends. But regardless of what type you have, again, it goes back to communicating your assets, not about the organization or the company. There's many students that I've met with as I'm going over their resume or CV, and the students are actually bullet pointing or narrating what the company or organization does. Nonprofit organization with 1,500 employees, like, we don't want to know about the organization. We want to know what you did. What was your role? In thinking about what are your day-to-day operations, what are you teaching, whatever it is, we want to know what you've done. Your information on that document has the company, the institution, where it's located. So if we have a question about that, we can certainly go Google it and look up more information about the organization, but you do not need to put a description of what that company or organization or institution is. We just want to know what you did. Yes. So are you asking about the description of the company or the organization? Your experiences. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's okay. If you're looking for 2 types of positions, maybe you're thinking you might want to go the industry or organization route, or you want to go the institution, academia route. We still want to know what your role or what your experience is, what you did, what your daily operations or everyday work was. We still don't need to know about the organization or the company. Did that answer your question? Okay. All right, so these are also some FAQs that I get from graduate students is, when do I use which one? What are the differences between the two when it comes to formatting? What do they look like? And then do I need to have both formats? So just most simply put, a resume is typically if you are looking to go into a nonprofit organization, a company, let's say MedPace, hospital. Those typically are going to require a resume. Now, if you do have experiences with research, conferences, publications, you don't want to just not put that on your resume. You want to add that into your resume, but it's just kind of reformatting it into a company or industry jargon. So whereas a CV is going to be specifically for academia or a research type position, let's say a senior scientist in a hospital, that's going to require you to be writing grants, to be doing research, to be doing publications. So those are typically when you're going to need, and certainly if you're applying for faculty positions. So that's when you're going to have a CV, and that's going to highlight academia, only academia, so, or what's related to that job. So that on your CV, it could be 10 pages, it could be 5 pages. Some of your professors right now on their CVs, it could be 20 to 30 pages. So, and eventually If you have a CV, you will get there. But don't get too hung up on the pages yet. Just put down your academic experiences. So things that are going to be in a CV, certainly at the top, education. Then you're going to go into, and we'll talk about this in a few more slides, listing either teaching experience, graduate assistantship, research experience, conferences and publications, honors and awards, professional associations, technical skills, specifically looking for maybe SPSS, type of data analyzing techniques. So that's typically what's included on the community service. That you'll need that for your dossier if you're going for tenure track, like what's your commitment to the university, so university involvement. So that's typically what's going to be on the CV. On a resume, typically for graduate students, you're looking at 2 pages. So it's taking all of your experiences and putting it into 2 pages. So that is a very specific page limit. So undergraduates for resumes, typically 1 page. Graduate students, 2 pages, maybe 2.5. But it's concise and to the point and articulate. So things that are going to be on a resume, pretty much similar things that's going to be on a CV, but work experience or relevant experience is going to be on your resume. So perhaps you had a previous position in a nonprofit organization. Perhaps you worked in a hospital as a nurse. Those are maybe things that might be on your resume under work experience that might not be fitting on a CV. So it's thinking about what is the specific job you're applying for, and then kind of then catering it and focusing it on that. For instance, though, it could kind of go either way, because let's say gerontology PhD students, some of them might have been a nurse. Well, we do want to have that on their CV to showcase their nursing experience, because that's relevant to potential positions that they might be applying for. If they're looking to go in academia, there's things that they might be teaching that's relevant to that. So you just really have to think about what you're applying for and then create the document based on that. And again, don't worry, I'll show you some examples. So the biggest difference between the two really is just academia versus industry, and then page limits. 2 pages for graduate students, maybe 2.5. And then CV, it could just be however many pages. And then do I need to have both formats? I think that really just depends on what it is that you're looking to accomplish. So if you're thinking, I do kind of want to start applying for lecturer positions, clinical positions, tenure track positions, but I also think I might want to pursue executive director of nonprofit organizations, or working in a hospital setting, working in MedPace, Cincinnati Children's, whatever that is, then you might want to think about perhaps a resume if it's not research-based. All right, so thinking about things that when you're uploading that document or submitting it, regardless if you have a resume or a CV, what are some things that the employer is looking at? So I just want to kind of highlight a few things. Definitely looking for keywords, those strong action verbs. So developed, monitored, facilitated, created, managed. Those are some really good, strong action verbs that you want to start your bullet points with, if that's the format you have, or if you have a narrative format for a CV, you still want to have really strong action verbs. That really sets the tone for that statement. So if, for instance, you have the start of your bullet point or narrative helped, think about, gosh, I think there's a stronger action verb that I can really use to help really hit this home and to make this a really strong statement. So it's not fluff. It's not saying something that's not true. It's just making it a stronger bullet point or a stronger sentence. You always want to make sure that you are able to provide an example based on your bullet point. So because that's what the employer is framing their conversation with, whether it's for a faculty position or an industry position, they're going to have your resume or CV in front of them, and they're going to be guiding having that document help guide them in that interview with you. So if they say, tell me more about that time that you facilitated this social media platform within your department, you want to make sure that you can really tell them about that experience. So you don't want to just put things down because you think that's what they want to hear. You want to be authentic in what you're crafting and then be able to discuss it. You just want to have those strong action verbs. You want it to look clean. Again, that's for both documents. You want it to essentially tell a story. You want it to be organized. You want to make sure you use spell check. And you certainly want to make sure that you meet the qualifications. So if they're saying that they want you to either have completed your PhD, or by the time the position starts, you will have needed to obtain your PhD, and you're a master's student, you're not qualified for that position, so don't even submit that application. You just want to make sure that you meet the minimum qualifications. So usually there's kind of two components on a job description: minimum qualifications and then preferred qualifications. If you meet the minimum qualifications but you don't quite meet the preferred, but if the minimum is there, then absolutely go ahead and apply. Hands down, apply. Just really make sure that your document really translates your experiences and helps showcase why you're just such a great fit for that institution or organization. So industry positions, even for graduate students who have 2 pages, 10 to 30 seconds is typically what is the first round of look-ats from human resources or talent acquisition, those that are hiring. It's quick. So again, when we say snapshot, it needs to be a quick snapshot. And that's why you want it to then go back to clean, well-organized, error-free, because you want the reader to really be able to move through the document quickly. Now within academia, because you have a CV, you're going to have multiple pages. So it's impossible to really read through all of the work that you've done within 10 to 30 seconds. So with the CV, typically the committee is going through it with several minutes. So you have a little bit more time for academia, but it's because you have more pages. So things to think about. When it comes to a CV, you want to think about the order of your experiences, but based on the job that you're applying for. So if you're applying for a Research 1 institution and you're looking to go into academia, well, we know that a Research 1 institution is really focusing on research and then teaching. So you want to have your research experience right underneath education, which will always be first. So education, research experience for R1, then teaching experience, then everything else. Conferences and publications. You're going to just keep kind of going down that list. If you're applying for, let's say, a Research 2 institution, we know, such as Miami, we know that teaching is first, research is second. So education, teaching experience, research experience, then everything else. Conferences, publications, grants awarded, honors and awards, then you're going to go down that way. So you have to really know the institution that you're applying for. You really want that specific document to speak to that institution. If you're applying to Research 1s and Research 2s, you're going to have 2 different formats of your CV. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it just depends on the type of institution and the amount of research that they do. That's typically just how they're labeled, R1, R2. It should be able to be made apparent to you based on the mission statement or the value statement about what it is they're looking for faculty. So you'll find that either in the job description, it will say like R1, it usually will tell you, or it will say we place a high amount undergraduate teaching is our first focus, and then research. So like you'll know based on the wording. Yeah. But also to your professors, your faculty can help you kind of determine too the institutions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mhm. Mhm. So so I would still say your research experience and then teaching and then publications. Um, but I can also see the argument for listing publications on at the very top under education, but I have not seen many formats that way. Doesn't mean it's correct, but even when you're looking through your faculty CVs that most of you can see on your department's website, you'll probably see like teaching experience and then research and then publications. But I could see an argument because the publications mean that you're published with some research. So I think I could also see that format. Yeah. So I don't think there's any really right or wrong answer. Yeah. So order goes the same for a resume. Should you have that, you have to know the organization that you're applying to. So again, just like a CV, your education is going to be on the top. It always will. And then your degrees listed. But then you want to kind of know what is the mission, what are the values of this organization, what is the role that you're applying to, and then shift it that way. So I'm trying to think of one of my more recent um, resume reviews. So typically, the work experience section is either related to either work experience or relevant experience. So if you really want to showcase specific roles that you had that are very specific to that job you're applying for, you can pull those out. If they're all, say, environmental science, you're applying for environmental science jobs, you have like 2 or 3 jobs that are related within that field, then you would label that relevant experience because you want to show the employer right under education, these are the roles that I've had that are very connected to this job I'm applying for. Then if you have other positions that you also want to showcase because you want to highlight your transferable skills or highlight that you have budget work or grant work, then you could title that under work experience. So again, it's very similar. You're speaking to the organization. So it's not really, it's acceptable to have multiple versions of a resume or a CV because you are always tailoring that document to the company or institution you're applying to. I cannot stress that enough. Using lines to break up content, I think that's really important because there's a lot of words on resumes and on CVs. So again, having it look clean and concise and in order, sometimes just putting a long line underneath your heading can really help break up that content and help, again, just better articulate to the person reading that document just what you've done in the organization. It's just clean and organized. Appropriate headings, I think we've already talked about that, so depending on where they're located. And then white space. I've seen resumes and CVs where everything is like put over to the left, and then on the right side of the page, there's just tons of white space. So I would encourage everyone, no matter what format, is to try not to have tons of white space. And it doesn't mean that you need to have it packed full of just lines and tons of things and words. It just means that you want to just organize your document in a way where there's not a ton of white space or just a ton of, on the right side, just empty. So you just want to try to be thoughtful about the way that you showcase that. So maybe put the dates that you worked over on the right side, and then your bullet points or your narrative are on the left. You don't want to just smush everything over to that left side because then it just doesn't look well organized. So all of these things really matter. So again, we kind of already talked about this of just 2 pages for graduate students. There's a stigma. I thought I was only supposed to have 1 page. Yes, when you were an undergraduate. But when we think about graduate students, you have so much more experience than undergraduates. You've got more research. You've got posters. You've got publications. You've got graduate assistantships. You have teaching experience. So there's going to be just more on there. We've already talked about white space. Just normal typeface. I always say Times New Roman. I think it's just easy to read. That is kind of the standard. But if you have another font that you really prefer to use, like I think Calibri is another popular one, just as long as it's easy to read, then it doesn't really matter. But some of those like script looking ones where they're curly and curvy, not for a resume or a CV, don't use those. 10 to 12 font size is acceptable. You don't want it to be too small because then you don't want to have the employer like really squinting to read it. But again, on resumes, if you're really trying to get to that 2-page point, you might have to shift around your font size just to make sure it doesn't get too small. On a CV, you can absolutely have it at 12 font size because pages don't matter. So don't be afraid to play with your margins as well on both of your documents. That can also kind of help you push things out to the sides as well. And again, just easy to read. On a resume, the new industry standard, instead of your address on a resume, it's your LinkedIn profile web address. So for those of you that haven't yet put that on there, go ahead. I have met with students who do still want to have their permanent address on there, and I'm completely fine with that. You're not going to get docked by employers if you have it on there. It's just the new industry standard is you don't have to use that anymore. So if you think about it, employers are typically communicating with you through email. You're applying online now. So they're just usually emailing you back the contract or the negotiation letter. They're not sending you documents to your house. Even background checks are done through online. So that's the reason why it's no longer included. But I have met with students who've made an argument of, but here's why I really want to keep it on. For instance, a student was applying for jobs. She was graduating with her master's. She was applying for jobs in Oregon, and her family still lived in Oregon. So she's like, I don't want to take it off because I want them to know that I will have a place to live, when just wanted to kind of maybe put herself to the top because her family's still stationed in Oregon. And so sometimes money can make a difference. Like if they see her resume and she's qualified but lives in Oxford, Ohio, and then someone else who's just as qualified but lives in Oregon, maybe they might choose this person in Oregon because they won't have to pay for their moving costs. They're already there. So not saying that that could be the case, but those are sometimes things employers think about. So she wanted to showcase, I can go back to Oregon at any point. So I can see times where you might want to leave it on. You always, if you have to print it off, even though we're not really printing off resumes and CVs anymore, but if you're in a job, going to a job fair, a career fair, you do want to make sure you have it printed off on resume paper, which you can just pick up at the bookstore, a huge ream of it. It's thicker than normal paper, but it's a little bit lighter than cardstock. So I always do say too, when you go to that face-to-face interview, you do want to have copies of your resume or CV printed off. Even though the committee is going to have it, you do still want to have it printed off on CV paper or resume paper, just in case someone didn't bring, someone on the committee didn't bring it. So then you can say, would you like a copy? I've had so many students who want me to take a look at their resume, send it to me as an attachment as a Word doc, and then I'm marking it up because things are moved around and not organized. It's because Word, when you send it through Word, it messes up your formatting. So when you're submitting it to an employer or for me to review so I can see what it really looks like, you must save it as a PDF. That way it's not going to mess with the formatting. It's not going to move things around. I don't know why Word does it that way, but just know if you save it as a PDF and when you upload it, it won't get jostled around. So format for a CV, yes, sure, yes. Yes, so the question was, for those of you tuning in who might not have heard that, so the question is, how do I get that LinkedIn address to put it on my resume? So you just go to your actual LinkedIn page and you copy it, and then you just put it at the top of your heading on your resume. Now, there is a way to shorten, because if you look at that URL, it's really long. There's a way to edit it. So when you go on your LinkedIn profile, at the very top, it says edit URL. So you can cut off those random numbers that appear after your name. It just makes it look cleaner, more organized. Then it's not this huge thing on the heading of your resume. So go ahead and do that. Very easy to do. You just kind of backspace when you hit the edit URL, and then you can cut it off wherever you want. So I would recommend doing that. Great question. So I know the copy shop does that. Yes. Shriver. Yes, where you can just upload your document and they'll print it off on resume paper. You do have to pay for it. But I think that that's usually what our students do for the career fair, is they print off like 50 copies of their resume through the copy shop and then just pay. Yes. All right, so format for the CV, again, I think I've made clear, no page limit. I always encourage you to look at your faculty's CVs within your home department so that you could really kind of just get a clear picture of what their experiences have been. Maybe use that as benchmarkers for you. Maybe help you fill in some gaps that you might have. Or just things to think about, like, gosh, I do think within the next couple years I want to get this particular experience, or gosh, I haven't been involved in a professional association, so maybe here's things I want to do. It's just always good to refer to them. We've talked about the white space, talked about the normal typeface. It's all applicable to CVs. Font size, resume paper, save as a PDF, all applies. Yes? So I'll show you when we get to the specific examples, but just where there's a lot of white space and it's not evenly spread throughout the paper. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we're going to move on to the different components or headings of the two different documents. So for starting with resume first, maybe some things you might want to think about as headings. You're always going to have at the very top of your resume your name, email, phone number, and LinkedIn address. Unless you feel like you need to also put in your home address, then absolutely do it. There's no need for an objective or a summary of qualification statement. That's no longer an industry standard of stating what you're looking for or why you're applying, because it's already should be coming across in your cover letter and throughout your bullet point. So it's duplicative. So no longer include that. Typical headings that are included on a resume: work experience, related experience, volunteer experience. Those are usually constants in resumes. But other things to think about, additional headings: honors and awards, conferences and research, technical skills. I meet with students sometimes who in the skills section put like time management, project management, multitasker. We're not looking for soft skills in that section, so do not put those in there. And that's for both in resumes and CVs. We don't want to know about your soft skills. We want to know about your technical skills. Not all students have that section on there, and you don't have to, but if you are doing research, which I would guess many of you are in some capacity, depending on what specific program you're in. It could be even SurveyMonkey. It could be SPSS. It could be Qualtrics. Microsoft Office. We want to know that you can do that. PowerPoint, Word, Excel. Those are the types of skills we're looking for. The soft skills, the time management, the multitasking, project management, that should be made clear in your bullet points or your narratives. So you shouldn't have to state that. So just think skills. We want technical skills, not soft skills, and that's for both. And there could be many other headings on here that I haven't talked about on your resume. Again, I think it's based on what your experiences are, and then does it fit to put it on there based on the job you're applying for. All right, components for CV. So here's some typical headings that we usually see. So again, your heading, name, email. So now this goes to some of the differences. Typically on a CV, you are not going to be putting your LinkedIn address on your CV. The search committee probably will still look for it as a part of just application materials, like, oh, does this person have a LinkedIn? But it's really not that widely used in academia. ResearchGate is something that you probably will hear more about than LinkedIn, but I'm not saying to put that on the heading. But typically just within academia, it's not widely used. But I don't think it's a bad idea to have it, because it's still a great opportunity to network. So usually, if you have an office, a GA office, and a phone number, you can put your work office and your cell phone number. I'll show you the examples of an example I have of a PhD student who's in McGuffey, and they have their work and their office phone. That's completely acceptable on a CV. Then you're going to have your education. Most recent is first. So if you're a doc student, doc, master's, undergraduate. If you're a master's student, master's, undergraduate. So what you're doing right now is always going to be first. I always encourage, and I think it's such a missed opportunity for students who don't use this, and when they come to me, I tell them to do it. If you're doing a master's thesis, that title of the thesis should be on there. Underneath, Masters of History. Your thesis should be there in italics. If you're working on a dissertation, that should be, or have a working title, that should be under your PhD in italics. If you are in another program for your master's that doesn't do a thesis but does a capstone or a project, that's still something you want to tout. You want to highlight that because you're probably still doing some type of research, some type of reading, some type of project. Again, it's all about showing an employer that you have a specific understanding of this particular topic that you've spent a lot of time on. So it doesn't have to just be thesis, dissertation, project capstone, whatever that specific title is within your home department, you want to list it. Then, based on the type of institution you're applying to, the R1, the R2, the research experience and teaching experience. And that is if you don't have to be instructor of record to put teaching experience. If you're a teaching assistant, graduate assistant, and you are co-facilitating a course with an instructor, that should be on there because you are still conveying some type of information to a class. So even if it's one course, still list that on there. You don't want to lose that experience. Conferences that you've attended, presentations and publications, that goes for invited talks. If you have had a professor say, you know, Shelby, you really have in-depth knowledge on this particular topic. I would love for you to come to my seminar and talk about this for the entire class period. That's an invited talk, so you should list it. Professional associations, honors and awards, university service, awarded grants, technical skills. Those are typically headings that would be included on your CV. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We might see other headings in the examples I show you, but these are typically what we see most often. Now, you might be looking for a job within an industry or nonprofit organization, for example, and you have all of this experience, but you need a resume format. This can be on your resume, just needs to be 2 pages. So it's just condensing it. And we can do it. We really can. Yes? The technical experience section? So typically, that's a great question. So the question is, where might that specific heading of technical experience fall on your resume? That's usually, or CV, that's usually at the end. You want to highlight these other things first, the research, the teaching, the conferences, the publications. So usually the technical skills is towards the end of that document. The summary of experience. So that falls in line. So the question is, what about the summary of experience? So that falls in line with the objective statement or the objective statement or the summary of qualifications. That's no longer an industry standard. So that should be conveyed through your cover letter. So no need to put that on your document. All right, so a compelling bullet point. I've already talked about the use of strong action verbs, but things you want to think about when you're constructing your bullet point, or really even your narrative. What's the action verb to start that sentence? So we said facilitated, delegated, managed. Those are really good action verbs. But then what's the context of that? And then what was the result? So another way, the impact, the goal, and then what was the contribution that you made? That's kind of a good thing to get in the habit of thinking about and asking yourself, is each of these bullet points or narratives coming across with impact, goal, and contribution. Yeah. Yes, great. That's a great question. So, I lost my microphone here. This way. All right. So, absolutely, because you want to showcase that that's something you're working on. So the question is, if you haven't yet been awarded that grant, should you still list it on there? 100%. You can put that you've applied for it in that verbiage. Put applied for a $3,000 grant for, and then whatever it is. And that's okay as long as it doesn't look as if you've been awarded it. You have to just really be careful of your language. But yes, you should put that on there. The same thing goes for publications or presentations. If you've submitted to conferences, if you've submitted an abstract to a conference, no, sorry, that's a bad example. If you've submitted documents for publication and you know it's getting published, it just hasn't yet been published, you still should put that on there because you know it's going to be. You've got that confirmation. Then you would simply just put in parentheses in press. Because, again, you don't want to lose sight of that, and you want the employer to know these are things you're actively working on. But it's not accepted yet. So I think a way that you probably could do that would be, so it hasn't been accepted anywhere. So I would say if it's a paper that you have ready to go but you haven't submitted it to any platforms yet, then I would say probably you could put something like in a smaller heading, in works. But if it hasn't yet been submitted, I have caution about putting in press or the wording of that. But that's something we can talk about later. I just kind of have to see the format of that. But there might be a way to do it. All right, so now I have an example. So this is from a resume, but again, it can be very applicable to CV as well. But just kind of, I want you to look at a couple things when it comes to these bullet points and to make sure, regardless of what format you have, you're showcasing these things. So take a look at the strong action verbs that start those sentences. Lead, manage, solicited, selected, serve, interact. Those are all really good action verbs to start those sentences with. So just take a look at that, and then take a look at how within a couple of these sentences, things are quantified. Anytime you can quantify something is very powerful. Your eyes go right to it. So lead a group of 120 students in a 2-year selective program. So we're seeing how long that program is and how many students you're leading. Powerful. Budget or grants. Solicited community sponsorship and support for inner city programs that yielded $4,000 in donations. So attaching the amount. I think, again, that that's something that you're going to go right to, your eyes are going to go right to. It just, again, is a stronger statement that you're making when you can quantify things. And we think about transferable skills. It's something that we talk about a lot within the Career Center. But showcasing that you have budget experience, that you're able to mentor or teach students. Those are things that you want to make sure you're showcasing, and sometimes numbers help tell that story. And they're short and concise and to the point. You have a good idea of what that role was. They're not these long, wordy statements. Yes? So for a CV statement? So it's okay. Yeah, I think that's a great question. So the question is, if it's a research position within an industry or organization, how are you showcasing all that you've done? Is that right? So I think sometimes there's also a stigma that your bullet points should really only be like one line. It's okay, especially for graduate students, to have longer bullet points. So you can have 2 sentences within a bullet point. Like you're able to expand on your experiences a little bit more because you have more of that page limit. So you don't want to leave out things that you've done that you think are really relevant. Also, you can add more bullet points. So it doesn't have to just be 3 bullet points underneath a position that you've had. It can be 5. Um, 3 to 4 is generally what we see. But for a current position or something that really speaks to a job you're applying for, you can have more bullet points to really help hit home your experiences and how well they fit. These are just some examples of action verbs, but you can easily Google action verbs for resume, action verbs for CV. We also have them on our website too. But just try to start thinking about those strong action verbs to help have a stronger or more compelling bullet point or narrative. Executed, that's a good one. All right, so now I think I've said this, tailoring your resume or your CV for the industry or institution that you're applying to. I cannot stress that enough. I always tell students, when you're creating your documents or revising them or adjusting them, have the job description in front of you. That goes for cover letters too. When you're writing cover letters, have that job description in front of you to help inform you of what you should be saying in your bullet points, narrative, or in your cover letter. If you have 2 screens, that's great. You can have your document here, and then you can have the job description here, and then you're just able to pull words from that job description to help the employer see why you're such a good fit. And it is okay to do that. It's not plagiarism. As long as you have experiences or examples to back up that statement, you're good. Company website, institution website, again, it's kind of doing your research. So knowing the company or the institution that you're applying to, it's really important. Some of the questions they might say, so what do you know about our student population at this institution? Or what do you know about our company's values? Those are things they're going to ask you. So that can also help you inform the way you're writing your cover letter or your CV or resume. Knowing the company or the institution that you are applying to, always really good practice to get into. Glassdoor is also a really good website to take a look at. Helps you take a look at salaries, what people are saying that work at that particular institution or company. And LinkedIn is also good for that too, for finding people that might work at that institution or company you're applying to. Industry jargon, that really matters, and institution jargon. So I would say here, and some of you probably have some other words, but things that I think about within Miami University, I think of interdisciplinary, I think of innovation, creativity. Those are things that I think about when I think about Miami, because I hear these words. I hear them from President Crawford. I see them in Miami newsletters. I see those words, innovator, innovation. So those are things you probably want to make sure that you're able to talk about and craft your bullet point so that someone might say, oh, so tell me about this time. And if it's something that showcases you were creative or innovative, you scaled something, I don't know, like scaling up is a word within our office. So know what you're applying to and use some of that jargon. Other words, maybe within industry, brainstorming, benchmarks, assessment, though that could also be applicable to institutions. Application, educational technology, those are things, those are keywords that you want to make sure you have within your documents. Automated software, so I think it's our applicant tracking systems, ATS. That's a form of HR companies, institutions. Higher ed, I don't know so much about if higher ed uses this, but I know typically industry jobs do, where there's this ATS system for jobs that get tons and thousands and just 5,000 applications. They have an ATS software that combs through these resumes and documents to pull out keywords to then just put you to the top of the to the top of the pile. So sometimes that can cause students a little bit of angst of what's the right keywords, what do I use? It just, like it says here, helps the recruiter avoid looking through non-relevant documents if you're not a good fit for the job. So ways to navigate that are to make sure that your resume or CV is clean, error-free. Those are things that can clog up that ATS system. Making sure that you have that jargon, that industry jargon or institutional jargon that we just talked about, assessment, benchmarks, innovation. Those are things you want to make sure that you're highlighting. And you won't know that unless you're looking through the company or institution website and really doing your research and using the job description. So you shouldn't have a problem with ATS if you're doing everything that I just mentioned above. And then here, before we get into the examples, to just make sure if you're not on Handshake, it is single sign-on, but that's our online platform of how you make career advising appointments with me. And it's also another opportunity for you to job search. It's a job portal. And you can also get to it through My Miami. All right, so, and follow us on social media. All right, so I want to give some now examples to you all. So this is right on our website. So let's first start with CV. And I just want to highlight a couple fantastic examples for you to think about. Let's go to this one. All right, so this is one example, but here you can see there's no LinkedIn profile, and then there's the address of the office. The phone number isn't on here. Know that that's okay to include the phone number. So you're going to see the education. You're going to see the dissertation title on here. You're going to see that the white space is really even. So you're using the left side and the right side evenly. It's all easy to read. It's clear. It's concise. It's pretty. It's nice to look at. Then we have faculty experience, research experience. So this is in a bullet point approach. So know that that's okay within a CV to use bullet points and not narratives. And take a look. She uses very strong action verbs: facilitate, conduct, research. She quantified 12 masters and doctoral research members. It is okay, where I talked about don't list specifics about a job or an organization, it is okay to put a description of what the lab is for your research experience. Like, what is this lab? It is okay to put that on there. It's also okay to put your faculty mentor or your PI on there. Here she does it for Dr. Dugan, lists who her research advisor is. It's okay to do that. Then we have higher education administration experience. This is relevant to probably the positions she's applying for. My guess is maybe student affairs, faculty positions. All of these are relevant. Teaching experience, I love the way she lists this. The name of the course. You don't need course titles because those aren't always going to be transferable from institution to institution, but definitely putting the title of the course. Is it undergraduate or graduate? And then how many credit hours. I think this is a great thing. Something else I would encourage you all to think about, to not be afraid to put how many students are in that class and how many times you're teaching it. Is it 3 times a week, a lab of 30 students? I think that that's also pretty important to include on there. And then the semester in which you taught it. Research and scholarly publications. What I love about this is to always highlight your name. Even if you're first author, doesn't matter, still highlight it because you can see that it jumps out. Conference presentations, same thing, highlight your name if you have a bunch of co-presenters. It's okay to, again, make your name stand out because this is about you. Invited conference presentations, we talked about that, invited workshops, invited presentations. These are professional associations that she's been involved with. University service is another section that she has on there. Honors and awards that are all academia related. And then additional professional affiliations. So this, I believe, is 7 pages. We'll do one more example of a CV. This is pretty small here. You all see that okay? There we go. It's a little better. So here, this is a different format. So this is just another way for you to take a look at it. Here she has all of the information on here. I think, again, for me, I talked about early on is having lines to separate the content. So maybe she could have a line under education or take it the whole way across to break up that content, or under internships. But this is just another format, and it still works really well. So again, we have all of the education. Now, this particular person started with their bachelor's, master's, and PhD. I absolutely agree that you should always start with what you're working on now, so the present, and then go backwards from there. Postdoc, training fellowship, licensures or certifications. Some of you might need to have a certification or a license. Social workers, list that. Or if you're in another area that requires certifications, or making sure you note that, it's okay to have that. Clinical experience. Here you can see that this is almost more of a narrative format. And this is acceptable. I think for me, a personal preference is to have bullet points because it's a little bit easier to read, but it is okay to have this format. This is just another way for you to kind of think about how you might want to organize yours. Tons of clinical experience, it looks like. Here's teaching experience. Again, I am all about quantifying it, so always talking about how many students and how many times a week you taught that class. This is I think this is great to think about it this way. Under teaching experience, she also put when she was a guest lecturer. I love that. If you've been a guest lecturer or that invited talk, put that under teaching experience. If you've been an adjunct professor at another institution, absolutely. She has her TA role on here. Dissertation, thesis advising. Here's the research experience. She put the professor that she was supervised by. Good practice to get in. Publications, she bolded her name, which again I'm in favor of. Invited speaking engagements, I told you all to think about that. I'm guessing probably a lot of you have been invited to do a specific topic or talk. Put that. Workshops and trainings attended. And then honors and affiliation. So similar but yet different from the other CV example I showed you. And then just to do resume. So these are undergraduate resumes, but they're still going to give you an idea of what the format is. A couple things I want to point out. Notice that the LinkedIn profile is here. So this is a great way to organize it. I really like this. So you'll see that at the top. I also like how Paul used his lines. I was talking about that, where he takes the line under education, under related experience, under publications, and takes it the whole way across for ease of reading. His white space, he used that great. He has the content over to the left and then the dates over on the right. You can notice here he has publications and presentations on here. Again, you don't want to lose sight of that. Even like if you're doing a resume, you still want to showcase that experience. You can just see that it might just be a little bit more concise and specific and not so wordy because he had to think about the page. He could only have one page. We have leadership experience. I think no matter if it's for resumes or CVs, leadership experience is something that is important to showcase. Employers really value if you're involved in a company or if you're involved in a student organization and you have a leadership role. That's something that has many transferable skills. Or, for example, if you have a CV and you're on the Graduate Student Association Committee and you're president or secretary, that's something you might want to have on your CV, but you can also have that on your resume as well. Showcasing that you are in a leader type of position. There's so many transferable skills that come from that. So again, this is an undergraduate example. So it is only one page, but you can see that Paul did a great job of quantifying things. $3,500 grant, 25 students, delivered a 15-minute address. They're short and concise and really easy to read. I can show you one more here. So this is also going to be one page. Again, Nancy has her LinkedIn at the top. Education. Related experience to the job that she's applying for. So it looks like she's a nutrition major, so she's highlighting all of her experience in food service and other restaurants because that's incredibly relevant in that type of position. So she labeled it related experience. Other words are relevant experience. She really wants to highlight, this is what I've done in this area. Then listing volunteer and community experience. On a CV, that would probably be university service. Again, quantifying amounts, 100 and 150 students. It's really important. Strong action verbs, organized, supervised, hired, taught. So feel free at any time to go on our website and review these. I think this is just a great resource. It also gives other resources that you can take a look at. The differences, what is a resume, what is a CV, but feel free to view that and the different examples. It'll hopefully help you kind of create the template that you want to use. Does anyone have any other questions? What the award was for. That's a great question. So the question was, for those of you tuning in, is do I put a description of what the award or scholarship was for? Absolutely, because not everyone will know what that award was. If it's just like the Shelby Ballard Award, well, what is that? Is it because you've been amazing in the community and have done all of this, or what is it? So yes, just a one-line description of the scholarship or the honor or award will help bring across to the person who's reading it what that was for. So yes, great question. Anything else? Well, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes. For those of you watching online, if you have specific questions, feel free to email me at summers4, SUMMERS4 at Miami OH, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. For those of you that are here, I'll stick around for a few minutes. If you have quick questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. And don't forget too, I can absolutely meet, whether it's on the phone for a career advising appointment or face-to-face. So we can go more in depth. If you have very specific questions about your documents, we can do that too. All right, thank you very much.